All right, we're live now here on Facebook on Sunshine State Racing with Michael Franklin Jr. Going to do a little one-on-one talk, deep into his career, things that went right, went wrong, and just a little bit of everything that a lot of people may or may not know about him. Uh, Mike, you've been a kind of a, I mean, your career has been out there, but also your family kind of private in a way, and a lot of things a lot of people know a little bit about, don't know a lot. But how did you get started in racing?
Well, when my dad was racing, first of all, my parents were 17 years old when they had me, so they were just starting out. They were still kids, and here I come along, and my dad was racing. The doctor that actually helped my mom deliver me was a racer at the Florida City Speedway down here in Florida City, which is adjacent to Homestead. And he, my dad was a mechanic and at a Chevrolet dealership, and it sort of sparked my dad's interest and started racing weekly at Florida City Speedway. And then rest that was 1970. So that, I think the track stayed open until 76. And my dad raced there till then. And then we started running midgets. And obviously down here in South Florida, really nowhere to run midgets. So we started traveling, and, for the next, I don't know, probably from 76 to 86, we traveled everywhere, Southeast, for about 4 straight years. We would go run the, what they called the Indiana County Fair Week. So we would run, it was a midget, and we would go to Indiana and run like 4 different tracks in a 7-day period. And it was some fun times traveling up and down the road. And then the plan was for, back then, you had to be 16, had to have a driver's license to be able to race a stock car. So I really was I still am an open wheel gearhead. But I wanted to try to, I was all in racing. And my plan was to try to make a career out of it. So in South Florida, the traveling was starting to get to us a little bit. And we decided that Hialeah Speedway would be somewhere to get started, get my feet wet, see how everything worked out. And Dad and I built a mini stock and went up there, and actually didn't get it done until I was 17, and started racing there weekly. Ran there for a year, ran for Rookie of the Year, won that. I think we finished like 4th in the points. I think we won 4 or 5 times. And then we purchased a Thunder car, which was, even to this day, hands down the funnest division. They would start at Hialeah. They had a pretty unique deal where they did a 4-week average, and high point man would always start at scratch, and and the low point guy was on the pole. So it made for good racing. And you learned for 2 years. We did that, and learned a lot about racing, about passing cars, rolling just it really worked out. And then it felt like we had a pretty good foothold on where I wanted to go. And I had showed a little bit of what we all thought was a little bit of talent. And we purchased a late model in 92, and started traveling around.
And a lot of people, you guys way down in South Florida, not being able to drive into your 16 in the stock car. A lot of people today started a home track or local, like you would have started at Hialeah or something like that. But you guys had to start traveling when you were young, because that was the only way you could do it with the midgets and things like that, right?
Correct. I remember the guy that did our shocks there at the end, Scott Kaiser. I remember him saying, and this is 20 years ago, I remember him saying, man, geographically, you're absolutely in the worst place. And he was right. We would, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. We would have to leave a day earlier than anybody else just to get to our races. But that was our choice, so we dabbled a little bit around Florida, ran for Rookie of the Year in 92 with Don the Run's USA Series. And then sort of that took its toll. We went through Hurricane Andrew in 92. And even though we went through that, we still, my family was ate up with racing, and my mom and dad both, they were my biggest supporters and funders. And from 92 to 94, we just sort of just hit around Florida, ran a lot of big races, really never got into the local, but would go travel somewhere in Florida and pick a race and a long distance race and run, always with the mindset of trying to get my name out there, get exposure. And then in '95, we decided we were going to run the Florida Pro Series, Bert's deal, and really it was a good move. We ran for the championship, and lucky enough to win it in '95 and the Rookie of the Year. And then I think at that point, I think we started making some mistakes. In '96, the Hooters Pro Cup Series for late models was starting up. Bought a car for that, and we weren't ready for that, and weren't prepared for it. And ran '96 and '97. We ran a lot of those races and some all pro races, NASCAR all pro races. And then '98, we wanted to sort of get back and get a hold of the career, maybe gets our confidence up, because you start traveling and running a lot of these shows in Georgia, Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee. You're running against the best of the best. And if all your T's aren't crossed and your I's dotted, it's a very humbling sport. So for 2 years we did that, really never had any success. We'd run some races in Florida and we'd hit a win here and there, but '98 we decided to sort of concentrate back in Florida, try to get some exposure, get the name back out there in the winning ways, and ran for the Florida Pro Championship again in '98. Again, fortunate enough to win that. And then we went off and started traveling again in '99. And my timeline, my parents, when we started this whole thing, I'm a realist. My parents are realists. We had some money, but it wasn't the crazy money that would take me to the next level. So we were maxed out with traveling with a super late model. So I had told my parents early that by the time I reached 30, which was 2000, if there wasn't something on the horizon, or if there wasn't some hope somewhere, we would stop there. I would quit spending my parents' money, their retirement money, and start doing something different. So it's exactly what happened. We ran '98, '99, and this sport. So it's obviously, I love the sport. You love the sport, but it's rough. It's an emotional roller coaster at that level, trying to coordinate sponsors to get you to the next level. A lot of broken promises, a lot of people tell you what you want to hear until it's showtime, basically. So that wears on you. The way I did it, with the whole mindset of trying to make a career out of it, we only did it one way, and it burns you out. And there's a couple guys like Bigley, Joe, but Joe really don't work on his car. But I commend Billy, because for them to continue to do what he does at that level, you have nothing else. Like for me, I was single, no kids, worked for my family, so I was able to make things happen. But I was 29, it was '99. I was 29 years old, and I had made that promise to my parents that we'd go to 30. They had a lot of money invested. And I remember started the 2000 season. I was done. I was burned out, up and down the roads, traveling up and down the roads. From '98, '99 really burned me out because of the travel. We'd leave here Thursday night and go somewhere to an all pro race. Usually it was in the Carolinas. And, again, geographically, we're not in the best place. So it wore me out. So my point in saying all this is that I love the sport. I still love the sport. I'm a great spectator, but when you've had enough, this sport when you're done, you're done. And it just takes everything out of you. And, for me, the way I felt like I had to do it was to stay single, not have kids, and just all in, and I'd work at our family business during the day, and then every night I wouldn't even go home. At a condo, beautiful, beautiful condo, and I would leave our family business and go to where our race car shop, where the race cars were at. I would every night would go Circle K, get me a 32-ounce Coke, thing of orange crackers, head to the race car shop, work, and I'm not exaggerating. I'd get there at 5:30, and probably normally an early night would be 9:30 or 10, and that's every night, and then load up everything, go race, and then you don't get home till Sunday night because again, you're driving 12, 15, sometimes 20 hours to go to a race, and it just wears you out.
And when you say race car shop, for the most of the time when you guys had that, your race car shop was out of the family garage, right?
Yeah, we had an auto repair shop in town. My dad started it in '83, and it's a funny story because at first we had the race cars at the shop, at the business, and obviously we outgrew that when we started late model racing. But people would come into the shop. People are funny, and they would come into the shop and they would see the race car sitting there. And the first thing that they would say is, "Man, I see why this oil change is 1995. I see where, you know," and it just floored me that people, and that didn't happen just one or two times. It was a lot. And so we learned early that we had to take the race cars and move them to somewhere else so that people didn't get this uh, illusion that we were just weighing our money, because we weren't.
So in 92, when you really started, I guess, traveling or doing the big series, that's when Hurricane Andrew come through Homestead
Yeah.
and pretty much wiped out everything. So how was that year as a family and a community of trying to rebuild but still do the traveling racing that you were trying to do that year?
Well, it was August, so like I said earlier, we started, our plan was to run for rookie of the year in that USA series, and Mario and I both were doing the same thing at the same time, and we were three-quarters of the way through the year. Hurricane Andrew comes. Another funny story is we just purchased our first enclosed trailer, which is a 24-foot tag along. That back then, that was, you were high cotton then. And we got to use it at one race, and then Hurricane Andrew came, and it would sit in my parents' backyard, and they had a wooden fence, and the Hurricane Andrew blew the fence right into the side of the trailer, and then the wind, and it drilled holes all through the side of it. So, but honestly, the racing also, I think Andrew hit it hit the 24th of August, 92. We had a race in Lake City 2 weeks later. Yeah, Don pretty much had races every 3 weeks, so, which is a perfect schedule. So we had a couple weeks to sort of get our bearing. I mean, we were devastated. This town, I mean, I've been here 51 years, and this town it was gone. I mean, it just incredible. Words can't describe it, but we had a couple weeks to sort of get the business back operating. We had my house, my parents' house, my grandparents' houses. We got all them situated. And honestly, the racing sort of got us back to some normalcy. We loaded up, went to Lake City. I remember there's a Econo Lodge right there on Howe Drive. And that was the first hot shower we had taken in 3 weeks, and first time we've had electricity other than a generator. So it was a nice, the racing has provided a lot of neat things in my life, but that was one of the ones that definitely stand out because, it's, you never know how much you appreciate electricity and hot water until you don't have it. We went 67 days without it.
Yeah, it's crazy. And just so you know, on the Facebook feed, some people have already noticed your signs over behind you, the nice new decorations to your.
You see that?
And then Devin McLeod says, "Can we quit talking to Michael Franklin and talk to Mike Franklin?"
Mike Franklin left a long time ago, man. It's Mike Franklin was a very arrogant, self-consuming idiot, basically, And honestly, in racing, you really have to be pretty confident. And a lot of times people, which I was a jerk, but a lot of times that's mistaken for you still see me? I think I hit something.
Oh, you're good. I still see you.
Okay. They mistake your confidence and your cockiness for arrogance, and that happens. But to be a good race car driver, you have to do that. You have to know that you're one of the best there.
So let's talk about a little bit of the career. You had the timeline that said you wanted to make it by the time you were 30, and make it. We mean you wanted to be in NASCAR, and pretty much through those years, you were given everything you had to try to get sponsors and to make it big time. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, we had some really really neat deals. My mom did a really good job. doing that. That was her part of the business of the race team, and she did a really good job. And there at the end we had some Dodge sponsorship. We had a local Dodge dealership, and then that turned into some money from Dodge, and then through that we got connected with Popeye's Chicken, and got pretty high up there. And our next move, they were going to finance the whole our next move, which was going to be Pro Cup or the full series with the All Pro series. And they're right. I mean, talking about emotional roller coasters and being right there on the end of the hook. I mean, it was all done. The money was allocated for us, the whole 9 yards, and it was going to be a big move for us. And somebody, I won't mention the name, but somebody it's got a bigger name, obviously a lot bigger name, that ran NASCAR, come in and got our money. And that's sort of changed it for me. That was probably the third time, but that was the biggest financial commitment somebody was going to make. And when that happened, it knocked all the wind out of my sail.
And like I said, without mentioning names or companies, let's elaborate on that just a little bit, just for the young kids that are in it today that think I want to go to NASCAR. Just the challenges of at this level, because they're still going to have to work on their own cars and run late models and stuff like that, and have their parents help work on the cars. But at the same time, what's it like balancing that life with trying to find the sponsorship to secure it? And you said many broken promises and roller coasters. Just can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, it's changed. The sport's changed. I mean, our sport has changed, and it's not the same beast it was 20 years ago. You got to remember, we sold the family team in 2000, at the end of 2000, and it was a different dynamics back then. The money was there. It was in the sport, obviously, but it wasn't like it is now with these kids that are coming in that are 14, 15 years old that they couldn't notch a piece of tubing and build a car, much less know what a 9/16 wrench is. And I'm not envious of it, because more power to them, but it has changed our sport. And like Devin, LJ, Michael Goddard, there's 3 or 4 kids in that Bubba. I always have a hard time saying his last name, but
And
I mean, that kid's impressive. I watched his video from Saturday night, and I mean, he's got the patience and the foresight of a seasoned veteran in that race that he ran Saturday night. But we have some talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the problem is, you can have the talent all you want. You have to have an endless checkbook, basically, and that, because of that, it's changed the sport. And guys like myself back 20, 25 years ago, Devin, you never really get a chance to showcase your talent, because there's too many other ones that maybe don't have as much talent, but are able to write a check. And honestly, if I own a team and I'm looking for somebody to drive my car, obviously I'm going to go somewhere that somebody can write a check for helping flip the bill, because it's not cheap.
Yeah. And then we were talking a little bit before we came on about probably one of your, I guess, races that meant the most to you, or what you felt like one of the accomplishments. And we were talking about the race you got to race at Homestead, and you said, I think you came in second in fast time and got to start on the front row.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They building the racetrack here, and I think they finished it in 95. They started building it, and Ralph Sanchez had a lot to do with it. And it's actually, at the time, I was living in a condo out there. I basically could have spit on the racetrack. It just worked out. It was just neat, to have that big of a track in our town. And then it started looking like we're going to be able to race there with the All Pro Series. And, the first couple of times we raced there, we actually just used the car we ran in Florida. It was an offset car. And, there really wasn't a lot of requirements. And back then, the safety specs and stuff aren't quite like it was or it is now. But anyways, we ran there 2 or 3 times with the car that we ran all for the Florida Pro Series. But then they started mandating a perimeter car, which is a little different than an offset chassis. So we bought a new car, and we bought it just for 2 races a year at Homestead. And the first time we debuted the car, we qualified outside front row. I think there was probably 41, 42 cars. And let me tell you, that's a top three moment when they announced me in front of my hometown, and they sort of built it up a little bit. And yeah, that was a cool moment for sure.
As I say, I bet being just in your hometown and having that starting in the front row was an awesome feeling and memory that you won't ever forget.
Oh no, and definitely not. And then we had really good PR, and the local paper would write about us and let everybody know how we were doing at every race we went to. So people sort of knew that we were pretty big into racing, and then to be able to go out there and run in front of a lot of people that would have never seen us race, that was just cool. It was neat.
And then I'm going to jump all over the place. I don't know the full
It's
timeline,
okay.
but everybody I mean recently here the change from Mike Franklin to Michael Franklin, and your family's big in the faith, and you've come back a long ways to it.
Right.
But your family's been blessed a lot. Well, you guys were coming back from what, New Smyrna Speedway, and there was an accident that your dad probably shouldn't have survived.
Yeah, we were actually going to a race, and again, it was 95. We were running for the championship. And it was June 5th, 1995, and we had left to go to Lake City. Seems like that's all I talk about, but we were headed to Lake City for a points race, and we're just north of Orlando on the turnpike. And we had, at the time, we had a cube van, an old Penske cube van that we had got converted. The front half of it was living quarters. Back half was for, spare parts. We had actually a spare motor back there. And the thing would go 0 to 100 in about 30 feet, but it would, take a country mile to stop it. And we knew that, but we try to be careful with it. But the problem was it had just got done raining for like 2 or 3 minutes. It just made the roads really slick. And my dad was driving. We were, like I said, just a little north of Orlando. And we actually were supposed to stop in Orlando, but we had made good time. So my dad said, we'll just go get a room up there. So that was the plan, going up the road. I was in a bunk sleeping. We had 1, 2, 3 crew guys with us. So it was my dad driving, there's deaf kid that most everybody that knew us when we were racing the family team, Monkey. He was in the front, he was in the passenger seat. So it was me, my mom, and my guys in the back sleeping. And I woke up to the biggest thug you've ever heard in your life. And what had happened was we were coming over a small little crest in the turnpike. And when we just got to the top, everything was stopped. And my dad had about probably maybe 100 yards to get the thing stopped. We're probably going 75 mile an hour. So the first thing, that the next vehicle in front of us was a semi 18-wheeler. And I think this is what saved my dad's life, is the semi driver heard and saw us coming and knew we weren't going to stop. And he let off his brakes. So we drove into the back of the trailer of the 18-wheeler. And I've got a picture, but the whole impression of the back of the semi was all the way to the driver's seat. It blew the motor out of it. The motor was underneath the truck. It blew my dad through the seat. My dad, I'm telling you, man, it was touch and go there for about a week. And luckily, grace of God, he survived. And even to this day, he has complications because of it. But he had a halo, and it was bad. It was a bad deal. But one good thing about this sport, our sport, is that it's a big family. Even people you really don't get along with or race really hard, when something like that happens, it's overwhelming emotionally when you see the support. And we had a fan, that Cookie Lady, we called her, because they would go to James Powell and I. They'd go to every one of our races, and they would bring cookies for me and James after the races. And she lived really close to where this happened, and she came and got all our clothes and washed them. Just something as simple as that. But the sport, it's always been that way. No matter how it changes, you're always going to have that tight knit group of people that would do just about anything for you. But then come race time, want to beat the crap out of you.
Do you have a most memorable win?
Oh, for sure, no doubt. The Powell Memorial. Obviously everybody knows James and I are best friends and talk a couple times a day, actually. And when I won that, it was the 5th year. I mean, think about it. That happened. That almost tragedy for me happened on June 5th, 1995. James's tragedy happened June 7th, 1995. It's 2 days later. So, we've been through a lot. Obviously, his thing was way more, but for me to be able to win that race with the connection him and I have, it was by far the my biggest win. And then the second biggest one I would say would be after that wreck, the traffic wreck. Our next race was a doubleheader, Orlando, New Smyrna, and we won the Orlando race. My dad was there, so that you've got a picture of him with all the halos on his arm and neck brow. He was an eyesore, but that was pretty cool. Pretty cool to see my dad, which is a hardcore dude, to break down like that in Victory Lane was pretty cool.
And then let's stay on the James Powell and the Powell Memorial. And coincidence, this year's Powell Memorial, the 26th annual, is at Alltech, which happens to be Lake City.
Yeah,
where you talk
we're giving
about
Lake City a lot of plugs here.
Yeah, so it's coming up really soon. A big race that means a lot. You only won it on. You didn't win it on dirt and asphalt. You only won on asphalt, right?
Correct. Yeah. And it was actually at Ocala, which James's family owned that racetrack. But no, it was on asphalt. I don't know if anybody has won it on both. In fact, I don't think anybody has, but I know Wayne dominated it on asphalt, and then now Mark Whitener has been pretty much dominating it on dirt. But it has definitely came a long ways. I know through the connection with James that over the last couple of years when it was at Bubba's, obviously Bubba absolutely totally disrespected the race and caused, just James pulled the race that year, didn't even race it because this guy just pretty unbelievable. But anyways, it started to becoming like it just wasn't being done like he wanted it to do with the respect that he felt like it needed and it deserved. So he was gonna, at the end of the 25th, was just gonna say, he was contemplating just saying, it had its ride, it did its thing, and thanks for the memories. But Wendell at Alltech, I mean, he was friends of the family, knows the whole story, has a personal side to it, and man, let me tell you, he's taken it and ran with it, and he's got my buddy Jack back up about it, and see where it goes. But pretty excited, $26,000, or is it 20? Yes, $26,000 to win.
26,000.
Yeah, and I know some people were talking about. I know there's quite a few big names coming, and we're trying to get Scott to come, but I don't know if that's going to work out. But it would be, even if no big names came, just the fact that you have 40, 50 race cars there trying to get 24 spots, it's one hell of a race, that's for sure.
And to anybody that hasn't ever been, or anybody on the fence thinking about going this year, even just to watch the race, give everybody a kind of a brief, I guess, overview of what the weekend's like and what it means to James and the family. I mean, it's like one big family reunion.
Absolutely. And he says it best. He's like, they wanted him a couple years ago. They had him a ride. And let me tell you something, James is one hell of a race car driver, both dirt and asphalt. I'm not just saying that because he's my buddy, but he really is. And he's very, very humble. But to tell you how much he looks forward to it, he had a really neat quality ride, and he turned it down because he wants to see everybody that only comes out once a year to his race, his family's race. And he doesn't want to miss that. He doesn't want to miss seeing somebody that meant a lot to him and his family that only come to see James. And if he was racing, that wouldn't happen. So, so they got, I think it's Thursday night practice, then Friday nights qualifying and heat races. And then Saturday night I think it's always going to be 67 laps. And the motive behind that is because the wreck happened on 6-7. So they make it 67 laps. And I'm looking forward to it this year. It's Wendell has taken it and really, really done what it deserves. And I feel like it's probably the biggest dirt late model race in Florida.
And that's a really I mean, it was a fast half mile on asphalt, but I think it even seems to be a faster half mile on dirt.
Yeah, it is. I mean, last year was the first year that I had gone to the racetrack since they turned it into dirt. And man, he has done wonders with that place. I mean, the whole back straightaway is basically a high-end camping ground with oak trees everywhere. And that's what we do is a bunch of us get motorhomes and we all park together, and it's basically one big old party. And it's a lot of fun.
So in 2000, your family, you sold the family race team and you kind of hung it up. And then let's fast forward to, was it 2007, 2009, somewhere in that range that you were racing at Punta Gorda. How did that all come about, and who were you racing for?
Well, when we sold the family team, that was at the end of 2000, and I didn't know what I want to do. When you're consumed with something and it's all you know for 30 years, basically, because I mean, I have pictures of me at a racetrack when I'm in diapers, and now fast forward to the end of 2000, I had just turned 30. I didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like I didn't do what normal 20-year-olds did. I didn't do what 16-year-olds did. So here I am, 30 years old, trying to figure out what makes me tick other than a race car. So there's a period of time there that definitely got a little sideways, but started driving, picking up rides here and there. Did a lot of different stuff. I drove for the plumber, Jimmy Cope's ride there for a little while. Was able to go to Bristol and race there with an all-pro race. And I'll tell you a funny story about James and I, and I think LJ and Devin are going to go through this too. It's hard to race your best friend. And I had, I think it was 99. It might've been, I don't know if it was before we sold a team or after we sold a team, but I started driving for the plumber. Him and Jimmy parted ways and called us, and I think we drove for him like 3 or 4 times. But the reason I lost my ride, got fired, was the first 2 or 3 races we went and ran were all pro races at Lakeland, Bristol. I went to Kenley, and the first Florida race we ran was at New Smyrna, and it was just a 50 lap end of the month thing. James had just started driving for Mark Cowherd, and I was fresh in the plumber's car, and James started up front. I started behind him. He was leading. I got to him, and going down the front straightaway, I drove underneath him, getting into one, and he chopped me. But if you ever race against James Powell, I know Wayne Anderson and I have said this before, that's almost impossible. He is, you're not going to pass him unless you basically run him up the track. But anyways, we went down the front straightaway, got to his door, and he just doored me, sent me through the infield, and got out of the car and lost my ride because they thought I was being easy and didn't take them out, which is not the case. But it's hard to race your best friend, and especially when both him and I are so competitive that I get up on the wheel even more, so does he, and then that's what you get.
Okay, so then like I said, then you were racing for that, and then you had a pretty good run there for a couple of years. That it was Charlotte County Motorsports Park back then. Bobby Deal had some big races, and you were in the action class number 12, right?
Yeah. So my little cousin Christopher moved. Him and his family moved. They lived in Homestead. They moved after Hurricane Andrew. Moved to Cape Coral through business dealings and stuff. The Action Glass Company, Morris and Dennis, they own a pretty big glass window company. And my uncle, Chris's dad, had a lot of dealings with them. And anyway, long story short, they got Chris. They had a race car. They had a limited late model, and they were going through some drivers and struggling and this and that. But they got Chris to start driving it, and Chris had never driven anything in his defense, and that's a big task to take on when you've not driven anything and get in a car like that. So he drove for a little bit, and realized that he needed to get some experience in something else. So he told them that that him and I were cousins. They asked him to call me and see if I drive it. And at the time, I had moved. The only time in my life I ever moved out of Homestead, I was living in North Carolina, working for Speed, and then wound up being the Goodyear dirt tire guy for the Extreme Dirt Car Series. But he called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come once a month down here to these big races and race their car?" Sure, absolutely. So they would fly me down once a month, and we had some really good success in that car. And I just go on record to say, by far, the best team I ever drove for. They made it so fun, and with just the icing on the cake was the fact that we won a lot in it. There was a period of time that we won 3 in a row at Ponagore and 3 in a row at Bradenton, and we had a lot of success in that car. And just everybody out there, just for the record, I have no problem admitting when we cheated and won, but that car was straight up legal. It just everything just flowed with that car.
And you were, I mean, during that time, there were some big names and some big friends of yours that, I mean, Joe Winchell, Randy Fox. It wasn't like those were easy races.
Oh no.
Johnny K.
And then,
There were some of the best fields back then.
oh, and let me tell you something. Bobby was there's a lot of people that have a lot of ill will towards him, but let me tell you, it paid $2,500 to win the race, but which back then was pretty good money. It was 06, 07, and they sold their stuff in 08 when we had that big financial crunch. But so we had from 05, 06, and 07, somewhere in there's when Bobby Deal owned the track. And let me tell you, he threw some money, and it'd pay $2,500 to win. And then if you set fast time and chose to start scratch and won the race, it was another 2,500. So you basically, if you set fast time and decide to do that, you're racing for $5,000. Well, we were lucky enough to set fast time quite a lot. And every time we set fast time, I mean, in 100 laps at a track like that, with a car like that, you have a pretty good shot at it. So every time we set fast time, we'd start in the back and win the race. And believe it or not, we did that 3 times in a row. And whether Joe wants to admit it or not, he was there and he did get passed. And we were going for 4 in a row, and was passing a guy that I've never seen eye to eye, Johnny K. We was passing him for the lead and set me off in the infield. That ended our streak.
And then after that, like you said, they sold the car and you kind of got out of racing for a while, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got out of racing. I was done. Racer Rick from Southern Racing Fuel said it best and he was talking about James and I both, that we were started driving for other people. James had a family team till 2000, basically, and I had a family team till 2000. Then we started freelancing driving for other people. And he said it best. He said, he was friends with quite a few of the guys that we drove for, and he told me, he said, "Man, you guys got these guys at the wrong time of their career." They were wanting to enjoy life a little as much as they want to race. And I'll be honest with you, from 2000 till I started driving for the Morris and Dennis, about a 6-year run there, that I go to the racetrack, the racing, and I'm sad to admit it, but I'd go to the racetrack, and that wasn't the most important thing. That was just a reason to get everybody together and go have a good time.
And did you said you worked there for Speed for a while, and you were in North Carolina. Did that, I guess, kind of replace the getting to make it to NASCAR? Did that only fuel the I guess the hurt or the burn in your heart more that you didn't make it, that when you were getting to go there and see everybody else?
That's a good question. Never really thought of it that way, but to be honest with you, just off the top of my head now, like I was saying before, when you give everything you've got, and I'm not talking financial, I'm talking time, trying to reinvent the wheel, doing all these things, you're trying to make that's all you did. So when you have finally had enough, you truly have had enough and you're burned out. And I was okay with it. I was okay with I'm always going to be around racing. That is my sport. It is what I love. I actually love late model and dirt sprint car racing more than anything. But when I was done, Robert, truly, I was done. I mean, I accepted the fact that I hadn't made it. And actually now I tell my wife, sure, all the time, or not all the time, but it'll be Saturday, we'll be headed out on the boat or something. And I'm like, it's 90, down here in South Florida, it's hot, humidity. I would tell her, I say, listen, back in the day, we'd be at the racetrack right now. And I see you're doing it. A lot of people are still doing it, but I don't understand how I did it other than the fact that I just loved my sport and loved what I was doing. But it would be hard, very hard to try to do what I did back then. Now, there's no way I could do it.
And then probably just a little, like, I guess, dark spot. Probably 5 years ago, your life spiraled a little bit, and you got away from your beliefs and things that you weren't proud of, and then you started getting back on the way, and it was almost going to be like a Michael Franklin comeback. You got a chance
Yeah.
to drive for Girardi in the 12, and things just didn't work. Had it
Well,
was it that the technology and stuff had changed so much, and just you hadn't
there's
kept
quite a
up with
few
it being
things.
away?
There's quite a few things. Yeah, the technology, how you drove the cars was a lot different, but I could have adapted in time. But there's two things. Eh, there's a guy that I mean, let me back up for a second. That ride and that team in my heyday, so to speak, if I would have been offered that ride, I'd have been doing cartwheels to the racetrack. But it just worked out. His son Justin wasn't at the time wasn't able to drive anymore because he had broken his neck, and his dad Troy. I mean, money is absolutely no object there, and the full-time guy. But the problem there was there's two things. You got a guy that's wrenching on a car that just got taken out of the seat, and at that point, I wasn't all there as far as Karen. And it took my wife coming home from a race saying, listen, I was around you in the 12 car days in Morriston, Dennis, and I saw how you were. And now you're just going through the motion. You're not really wanting to be there. And then she was right, but a lot of the problem was I didn't care enough about the situation to be checking on things that I needed to be checking on, or I would have, 10 years before that. And I'm not pointing fingers, but and trust me, I had a lot to learn about how to drive a late model now as opposed to when I got out of them. But I don't think that I was getting a fair shake. We're just leaving it at that.
So just before we get into kind of wrapping up, can you go through some of the different peoples that you got to drive for over the years? I know there's probably some, but who were some of your most favorite rides?
Well, certainly, like I've said earlier, the SAR team out of Cape Coral, Morris and Dennis both drove for Time Lighting, drove for Mark Cowherd. I tell you, I want to give a little bit of a shout out. Mark Cowherd was a guy that raced had Bobby Cool race weekly at Hialeah, and they were just a weekly team, had the best of the best. And I was just a 17-year-old snot-nosed kid running a mini stock. So the deal was Bobby was an electrical contractor, and he had to work sometimes on Saturday. I'd never driven a V8 car in my life. The only thing I'd ever been behind is a 4-cylinder Pinto motor. And Mark Cowherd come over there and he goes, hey, man, he goes, hey, kid, he's actually the guy that gave me my nickname, Hollywood. He come over, said, hey, Bobby's not here. I need you to go practice my car. And you want to talk about freezing up? I said, I mean, what are you going to say? So I'd been in stock car racing maybe 6 months at the time. And here I am getting in a car that the guy that drove it, I idolized and I learned a lot from, Bobby Coyle. I'm in his car going out and practicing at my home track. And so I always owe something to Mark because he saw something in me that I didn't even see back then to put me in a car. And I mean, looking back on it now, you think about it, I'd done nothing but run a mini stock, and to put me in that thing was, you want to talk about blowing your head up. That was neat. And then it wound up happening quite a bit. And then I basically was his designated practice guy when Bobby couldn't show up. And then the big race at Hialeah is the Marion Edwards. So that particular year, they had 2 100-lap races that compiled that year's Marion Edwards. And he put me in the car, and that was neat. And speaking of the Marion Edwards race, so in 2000, I can tell you a quick story. In 2000, so up to 99, I was trying to make a career out of this. I wanted my name squeaky clean, never cheated, never pushed the rules, never nothing. well, like I said earlier, the start of 2000, it was all I could do to get to the end of 2000 because I'm just so burned out. So me, my mom, and my dad all sat down and just said, we've never pushed the rules here, never pushed the rules there. Let's take the last year that we're going to race and really just do some stuff and see what happens. So we did. I was told not to say anything, but they're just cool stories that nobody would ever know if you didn't say so. The last year that we raced that car, it was the car that I loved throughout all the years. It was the Port City car that I loved the most. We bought traction control. My dad is Einstein. I mean, the guy is an engineering brain. So he had come up with an idea back then. This is 2000 now. He was doing rear steer in our cars, and now they're just they've been doing for a few years. He was moving front end, bottom struts. Now they're doing that, and I wish I would have respected and understood and allowed him to do a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do. But, I was caught up in this is the way everybody's doing it. We have to do it. But so he come up with a tire soaking system that I could do in the car, idling around. So it was a Ford fuel pump that he mounted where nobody in a million years would have found it. And we ran tubes all through the frame, inside the frame rails. And then on the front tires, it was from the frame to the nose. Usually you run flat strap. Well, we sealed some round tubing with a bunch of holes in it. And on the inside, if you pulled that support out of the spud on the frame, there was a hose connected to it. So we would spray tire softener on the front tires that way. And then the same system where the rear deck goes up and turns, that bead right there where all the rivets are at, there was 2 there. So I could set my tires idling around under caution, had traction control, and then I had nitrous for qualifying. So we had pretty much everything covered. And funny story, and we'd run some Florida Pro races that year, hit and miss. And the guy that would stand in turn, they had two officials in turn 3 and turn 1 help coordinate lineups under caution. We come to me after race, and he had gotten David Russell, and he brought us over, and it was just us 3. And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I'm going to tell you right now. He says, I don't know which one of y'all is doing it. He says, but every time that y'all drive by me, one of y'all is squirting your tires. And he goes, I'm not going to take your cars apart, but he said, make sure it's gone by the next race. So, and it was, but that was a big hit because that sucker worked good.
So let's fast forward. We're running down here on end of an hour. But we all know you used to like to play the lottery and scratch off tickets a lot. So say you won you won the Powerball and you had an endless amounts of money. And I think I know the names you'll probably throw out here. Who are 2 or 3 guys in Florida racing today that if you had endless money and got to build a NASCAR team that you would try to take with you, and a little bit of why?
There's quite a few. There's like the people I listed earlier. LJ, Bubba, he's got a big future. At Tony's grandson at Colton, he seems like he's got it. But I mean, I hate to keep. I got a pretty good eye for the sport, and I remember the first time I raced against Ross. It was the end of the year race there at Punta Gore, and he had taken a car off the hill, put a motor in it, and if he wouldn't have had a flat tire, I wouldn't have won the year-ending race, and he would have won. And I remember getting out of the car saying, "That kid gets some money behind him. He's going to make it." Well, I feel personally, like Devin. I mean, there's a lot of people. Michael Goddard has got talent out the yin yang. LJ, but Devin just reminds me of myself a lot. He's very cocky, but he's good, and he knows he's good. And if I had an endless supply of money, first of all, I wouldn't be going NASCAR racing. I would have me a nice toter home. I'd have me 2 USAC sprint cars with no wings on them, and I'd be hitting a lot of dirt tracks around the country. But if I was going NASCAR racing and I had an endless, to answer your question, I would take Devin. Devin's got it, man. And it's sad because he's got it, and he'll never be able to hopefully he can, but odds are he's probably never going to be able to show what he can do. But there's there's tons of those guys everywhere through this country. There's plenty of them that will never be able to showcase their talent because, unfortunately, it's like somebody that plays high school football. You're good in high school playing football, but you don't go to college, and there's good college guys that don't go to pro. It just steadily, as you move up, it's narrowing the field, and it's sad to see. I lived it, so it's you also got to accept, and then like where I'm at now, I can look at him, I can look at a few other guys and see the drive they have, and they want to do it, they want to make it, but I wish I could just say, hey man, save your money and go pursue. I sort of make myself mad sometimes because if I start thinking about the money that we spent racing, if I would have had that and done some different things with it, I'd be in a little bit better shape than I am now. But I got made some lifetime friends and great relationships. You and I wouldn't even be sitting here talking if it wasn't for that, and you and I wouldn't be friends if it wasn't for racing. So, there's no, I'm not bitter towards it. Sometimes you almost become bitter towards the sport because there's so many broken promises that for me that were presented to me that really it left a bad taste in my mouth.
So let's expound a little bit on Ross Chastain. You were really successful at Charlotte, and he was too. And I've been told by several people that said they think him racing there all the years and being as good as he was there, with that being a little bit of a challenging track, that might have expounded over into why he's as successful as he is now. I mean, he's not. I mean, now he's got a cup ride and he's caught some breaks, but he put in his hard knocks and worked his way up, but and never gave up. But a lot of people said maybe learning there at Charlotte and just that track's a little challenging to get a hold of. That might be held. Would you say that's probably the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. But let me tell you something. That kid, like I said, the first time I raced against him, he'd never been in a limited car, and he took that car off the hill that they used as a display and put a motor in it out of his truck. And I'm telling you right now, he would have won that 150 lap race in December that they have every year. He would have won it if he wouldn't have had a flat tire and we all got by him. But that kid is talented. I mean, yes, you run Punta Gorda, but a track that's even more challenging than Punta Gorda was Hialeah Speedway. And they always would say, the old timers would say, you run good here, you pretty much run anywhere in the country and run good. And they were right. And Punta Gorda is close to that. But just the fact that he's just got raw talent, and he was in a position where I feel like, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like his family has some money that got him to the next level where different people were looking at him than the Saturday night crowd. And he had the talent, but he also had the money behind him to get him in front of the people that he needed to get in front of. And I remember his first interview when he ran IRP. I mean, he was like a deer in headlights. Now look at him. He's as polished as they get. And, proud to say he's a friend of mine, and he's representing Florida and Florida racing very well.
So I got just two more questions. One's going to be, one of the pictures I pulled for the promo was you and your dad with a deer and hunting. And I know that's something you like to do now. Has hunting for your family always been, I mean, even when you were back in the heyday race, is that something you guys always did, or is it something you got into kind of after the racing?
Yeah, no, when I tell you that racing was it, that was it. My dad's dad, my grandfather, he was a captain, charter fisherman. And, growing up, I was lucky enough to be able to go fish with him a lot, not really hunt, turkey hunting a little bit, but it's almost like a carryover, the adrenaline rush of deer hunting or any kind of hunting, really. There's very few things that will equal or fulfill the void of the adrenaline of getting in a race car and running a race. So, and people laugh when I say this all the time, but that high energy, high suspense, high pace of auto racing obviously fulfills that. But then sitting in a deer stand, peaceful, quiet, but when you see that buck and you see the rack, it's right there, man. You want to talk about maybe even a little bit more, as far as adrenaline. I know, like Bresnahan, we all raced together in the period of time that we've been talking about tonight. I see he's deer hunting. There's a lot of people, a lot of NASCAR drivers deer hunt. It's a you would never in a million years on paper think that that's an equal, but it really is, as far as the adrenaline and getting your blood flowing. So to answer your question, no, it's never really been. It's something I took after I got out of the seat of the cars, but it's cool. It's neat. But honestly, nothing will fill sitting in your car in a 100-lap race, leading a race with a caution with about 5 to go, and you're leading the race and you wind up winning and getting out of that thing and knowing what you put in it work wise and the sacrifices and the things that you do without to get there, to get out of that car and wave to your fans is very few things will ever fill that.
I know things today will probably never be the same as they were in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then racing really took a big hit with the crash of the economy in 2008-9. But I know you're not out much at the tracks now, but I know you watch the live feeds and you follow racing from a distance. Do you think racing's kind of making a little bit of a comeback right now, as much as it probably can? Like I said, I don't think it'll ever get back to where it was, but it seems to be in a pretty good place right now for considering the situation.
I don't know that I agree with. I'm not wanting to do it. I don't know. What I see personally, in my opinion, is it's out of control. I think maybe some people are getting the reins on it, but when you're spending, this is just what I've heard from a couple people. When you're spending $2,500, $3,000, sometimes $4,000 a corner for shocks and suspension, and you're racing for basically, I want to congratulate you on what you do for the Bigley race, but on the norm, you're racing for basically what we were racing for 20 years ago. And I can promise you right now, we didn't have that in shocks and suspension. If they could get that somehow or another, I don't know, it's the $1 million question to everybody, it's just evolution. You progress, you get faster. But if there was a way that they could put reins on, which I don't know, like I'm thinking as I'm talking, sprint car racing, super light model racing is the top of the top at your local levels. So do you put a rein on something like that? If you can't afford to race that, then you drop back to something that you can afford. That makes sense. But it just seems to me like super late model racing and certainly sprint car racing in Florida is taking a big hit. And I attribute a lot of it to just the raw expense of it, man. That's a lot of money. I was talking to my buddy Augie, owns that Big Frog late model team, dirt late model team. And I asked him just this week, we were talking, I said, hey man, what is a brand new rocket car with a reputable Clemens, well-known national motor, turnkey, ready to go, right top of the line, $120,000 for one car. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I'm sure super late model asphalt stuff is pretty close to the same. So, and there's just fewer and fewer people that can afford stuff like that at the level that you have to do to win. And yes, I feel like you're right. The racing has gotten better since that, but I don't know that it would ever be the 30 car fields that the ones that we had in the 90s and early 2000s. We'd go to race, they'd run B mains at Florida Pro races to make the field. And I don't know, who knows, but I certainly feel like my 2 cents worth is they need to figure out a way to rein back some of this stuff, because man, there's just the crop of the pool of people that you're getting to get involved in racing to be able to afford that kind of stuff is getting smaller and smaller.
All right. And to close out, last thing, I'm gonna let you close it out with if from somebody that lived the ups and downs and the hards and the ins and outs and the successes, if you had any words of advice for people like Bubba Van Devender or Colton Bettis or TJ DeCare, the young kids that are coming up in this and dreaming for the stars, is there any advice you would give them?
get out now, but no, I'm just kidding. Listen, if you love the sport like I did and you want to make a career out of it, who is anybody to knock that wind out of your sail? I hope you do it, but be realistic, but do what it takes. Like for me, it was nothing but I breathed, slept, ate, everything auto racing. Everything was about racing. If you're going to do it and you're going to chase that dream, more power to you and congratulations, but just do it right. And that means not getting married at 25. That means not having kids, because once you start getting married, start having kids, you can't give the sport that you want to make a success out of. You cannot give that 100% at that point. And then you're really third and long. If you go into it and give yourself a timeline, be fair about it, and give it everything you got. Don't be distracted, and enjoy the ride. It's fun, and you get to see a lot of. I mean, I've been to a lot of neat cities and been to a lot of neat places, but it was in on Friday night, leaving on Saturday night. Never got to see anything. That's what you got to do. You got to be 110% in, and no side distractions and no diversions, and give yourself a timeline and get after it. And don't be lazy. You can't be lazy. Try to stay on top of things. And, I don't want to sound doom and gloom and, racing, you're never going to make it. People make it. Ross is a perfect example. Who's to say them guys aren't? But you got to give yourself a fair shake. And what a fair shake in this sport is: total 100% commitment, no side distractions, and no partying on the weekends. And take it from me, you don't want to do that, because then your racing is affected. And go get it.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. It was nice to catch up with you and get to hear some of the stories that I knew a little bit about, but didn't know much of the details. And like I said, it's always been fun to watch you on the track and off the track, and I'm proud to call you a friend.
Yep, me too, Robert. And let me just real quickly say that what you and Jennifer do with Sunshine Racing, man, you guys, your love for this sport is very obvious. You do a phenomenal job, and you bring back interest into the sport. And I'm one of your biggest fans, and it's not just because we're friends, but because I'm able to see a bunch of stuff that I would have never seen because of your love for the sport and your meticulous chase for race coverage. And you need to be commended. You're doing a phenomenal job, and just keep it up, buddy. You got a fan here, and you got a lot of fans that really enjoy what you do, and keep it up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we ended the live stream, but
Are we what?
I said I just ended the live stream. We should be
Okay.
good.
Well, listen.